Module 1, Unit 1, using an OS. In this unit, our objective is to distinguish between different types of operating systems designed for, different kind of computers, from workstations, servers, mobiles, including embedded systems and virtualization. We will also identify the commonly used operating system either as a commercial or open source operating system from Windows, Mac OS, and Apple, also iOS from smartphone devices. And then we will also cover using a browser to view websites. Functions of an operating system. When we say operating system, what does it does? What does it do? That's when we say function of operating system. Ano ba ginagawa nito? So when we say operating system, it is an interface between a user and a computer. Remember a previous unit, di ba? When we say computer, merong hardware, merong software, and the interface, and then the software is the operating system. When it comes to interface, meron tinatawag na shell or GUI, graphical user interface, or a command line. Yeah, shell and command line, ito yung mga syntax based. You don't see anything but a black screen or blue screen, and you type in the command to view or to do something or to display something. And GUI, point and click, point and click. That's what it does. And then the functions of an OS is an interface as well between the application and the hardware. Di ba sa software, remember, merong operating system and applications. Yung applications, kailangan ng operating system to run. An operating system is actually interacts an interface between the hardware. So, yung applications that, the type in, for example, sa Word or spreadsheet or PowerPoint, those are the applications that will be processed, all the information by the operating system. Now, if it is an application is like a browser runs an operating system to communicate with another computer. So this interface, merong components like the kernels and the device drivers. Ito yung components ng operating system to interface with. Yung kernel kasi ito yung direct interface with the hardware. And then meron mga computer utilities, di ba? Yung mga antivirus, no? And then yung system help. Those are another kind of built-in applications nga lang with the operating system. And when we say interface between an operating system, it's either a 32-bit or 64-bit. And then meron din tinatawag na application compatibility. Meron mga applications that doesn't run on the newer version of the operating system and it only runs on the latest version. And meron naman compatibility that runs on different version, either 32-bit or 64-bit. So compatibility is a word that or a term that you need to be familiar with, to be aware of, that when you're having an application, you need to be sure that it's compatible with operating system. And then, functions of the operating system, as I've said, yung mga built-in applications, meron mga system help like disk space remaining, no, memory consumption, o kaya yung resources ng CPU. Functionalities like for shutting down, and then for iba ba mga functionality that you use in the operating system, like sa network, even the internet or the other applications. And data management as well is being done sa operating system. Data management in a sense like copy, paste, save, storage, di ba? Those are the things that you do when you manage the data. Now let's talk about operating system on different kind of computers, workstations, servers, and mobile devices. So in a typical workstation operating system, ang makikita mo dyan yung Microsoft Windows, Apple, from Apple himself, OS X or Mac OS, and then yung open system for like Linux, and then those embedded software like Chrome OS. Chrome OS from Google if you're not yet aware of it. And then meron din mga workstation na we call enterprise client. These are operating system that are used in business. Client that comes with different licenses as well, kaya client. And then meron ding operating system at the server level na tinatawag is network operating system. Ilang nabago dyan. That's what it is. Network operating system and also a workstation OS that we call home client. Ito yung mga home, may mga features na that are present sa enterprise that is not that's not it's been eliminated sa home client because when you have more resources, you have more functionalities, you have more features in a particular operating system, it requires a higher hardware. I mean, a more powerful hardware. And then here, we have OS that runs on mobile devices. Ano ba yung mga OS na yan? Those are the Apple iOS. And we have this, we also know the Android. These are the type of hardware na naka-fix or tied to the hardware. You see the difference between the OS? On Workstation OS, you can replace an operating system. You can use any operating system except for Apple. Dito sa mobile devices, kung ano yung naka-install, that's it. You cannot change it. And then, I briefly discussed earlier yung server operating system as a network operating system. Ito kasi network operating system, yung mga enterprise client din. But this one as a server, when we say server, di ba, these are stronger hardware that runs a more feature-rich operating system. Kasi meron dyan mga tinatawag na domain controller o kaya mga network management. Those are the things that doesn't run on a typical workstation. So ano ba yung mga OS that runs on server like Windows? Of course, these are most dominant software vendor, Windows Server, mga 2019 to date. Meron mga tinatawag na Windows NT, Windows 2003, Windows Server actually 2003, and so on. Linux as a server, aside from as a workstation operating system, it can also be used as a server operating system, and so as the Unix. So may mga features, as I've said, that only needs to be run at the server level, that you don't need and that's being installed or it doesn't come with the operating system for workstation purposes. Meron din, of course, just like any operating system, na meron command line operation. Now, let's talk about operating system na tinatawag na open source or commercial. When we say commercial operating system, guys, these are the things that you buy, that you download, that comes with the license. So it is built by a particular vendor, Microsoft, Apple, or Android. The Android itself, Android Chrome, for example. They are made by the vendor, kaya nga tinatawag na proprietary. When we say proprietary, they are the sole owner, they have the copyrights, and the confidentiality and secret only belongs to them, of course. Proprietary, and it is built and designed specifically by vendor for a specific purpose, for specific application, or specific hardware or platform, I would say. Kaya siya commercial OS. The very important thing you have to remember is comes with the license and you purchase that. Binibili. And then yung open source just like Linux, Unix, or Android, these are can be reused. It doesn't need a license. It's open to everyone. You can actually create or publish your own customization about the operating system. Na gusto mo, you're the only one using it, you're the only one doing it. You can do that. That's open source. Now, meron din tinatawag na embedded OS. When we say embedded OS, these are the one specific, written for a particular hardware. It does it runs on a built-in memory or built-in disk or built hard drive on a particular hardware. Embedded yun eh. Hindi siya yung ini-install or dina-download to be installed. When the hardware is being built and then installed as I mean the only way to install the operating system or embedded OS is as the hardware being manufactured. Ito yung mga tulad ng smartphones, embedded OS yon. May mga PC na rin na mga merong embedded OS. Static environment, I mean, it's like whatever is there, that's all you have. And you cannot use it for another purpose. Kung anong purpose ang nilagay doon, that's all you can do. Time-sensitive operation, do yan ang purpose ng embedded OS. What do you mean by that time-sensitive operation? When you say kasi sa embedded OS, usually sa mga industrial environment, that once you enter an information, pinaprocess kagad ng machine or ng hardware. Remember, you need to understand na yung sa computer, di ba, sa typical computer, merong application, merong operating system. So, bago makarating sa hardware, yung application dadaan muna sa operating system. So, it is virtual to our senses, not unless na super bagal na yung computer that you will see it's very slow, but on an embedded OS, you don't see that. You won't see the slowness because it is the software is directly interacting. The information is directly entered sa machine itself. It's directly processed. Kaya ito'y ginagamit sa mga industrial because of high reliability requirement. Imagine a machine to process something, no, lalo na mga time sensitive task. So doon ng it needs to be an embedded OS. Kaya ano siya, real time. Ang tawag sa kanya is mga real time operating system. Now, we also have this what we call firmware. This is another type of software. Um, More embedded OS kasi it's an operating system. Firmware is not really an operating system, but it is also software that functions directly with the hardware. Kung mag power on, power off, it is triggered and operated by a program. Firmware tawag doon. It's another form of program. So it doesn't change all the time because not unless the change is only as an enhancement that does because it's this we're talking about the same hardware. It is as a program that is written to specific hardware and hardware doesn't change unless you build something or you change something. You need to rewrite the firmware. So ito yung firmware application example ng firmware yung mga tinatawag na BIOS. That runs on the computer. You know that BIOS, when you boot up yung blue screen, those are the controls or the controls that you want to to configure on the computer itself. Like for example, meron kang additional hard drive or additional peripheral. You do it with the firmware that communicates with the hardware directly. Yan yung tinatawag na BIOS. Or ang bagong version, another firmware is the UEFI. I read this as UEFI, Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. Uh, by concept, it's like BIOS, and it's also a firmware directly written, but more advanced features and more usability, GUI controls, user interface, ang GUI control yan. Then another applications of firmware, for example, sa graphic adapters, yung mga expansion cards used for video gaming, mga graphic adapters yon. Those are expansion cards that has more specific or more powerful hardware functionalities that comes with specific programs, firmware, just like drivers, these are device drivers or network adapters. May mga firmware din dyan. Now, another type of operating system that you can find is in the world of virtualizations or virtual machines. For example, on this right screen, this is an example of a virtual machine management software. So when we say virtualization, it's running multiple operating system on a single hardware or single computer. For example, yung isa niyong computer, di ba? Meron lang Windows yan, or either you have a Mac, Mac lang meron dyan, or a Chromebook. Now, when you say virtualization, the same computer, you can have Windows. You can use different version of Windows, and you can run also different version of Linux. Again, to simply say it, multiple operating system on a single computer. Virtualized, virtualized machines. So, ang host computer yan. The same computer, we call it, no? That runs multiple OS, the host computer. And the technology for virtualization is what we call the hypervisor. Kung sa Microsoft or sa Windows, they call it hypervisor itself, and for ibang vendor like VMware, ESX naman. There are two types of hypervisor for virtualization. We have this type 1, yung bare metal, meaning the virtualization software itself is running the hardware, on the computer hardware directly. Yung type 2 naman, you need to have an operating system to run the VM software or the hypervisor, and then you can install or use multiple operating system. And then this terminology that you need to be familiarized with is when you are hosting multiple OS, ang tawag doon, guest OS or virtual machines, or they call it VMs, virtual machines. Virtual machines running on the same computer. Now, let's discuss more about Microsoft Windows when it comes to operating when using an operating system, because that is widely used, especially at home. Though meron ng Mac OS na ginagamit sa bahay, but the only difference is that it's more pricey, more feature rich, but we will come to that. Now, Microsoft Windows is actually 90% that runs on all desktops. 90% majority, marami gumagamit yan not only at home but even at office. They dominated the market, the industry. Bill Gates, diba? Kaya he was once the richest man in the world. And then the client server editions, meron din yan, Microsoft. Yung mga Windows 10, Windows Server, those are Windows editions. Since, when is the earliest that you have heard about Windows? Marami ng version yan over the years. Before even you were born, back in the 90s, meron ng version ng Microsoft na Windows. So, again, what is the oldest Windows version that you can remember? We will come to that, no? So, Windows 10 is the most recent Windows operating system that we use, di ba? So, it's been released since 2015, and then from anniversary date, etong 1607, this is the built version. Windows 10 built version that it's been revised and improved with an update that was released at fall, built number 1709, and later on at spring na-release ng bagong version na naman, a built version 1803. So it is designed to run on not only on PCs and laptops but also on smartphones, tablets, or the combination of the both, yung tinatawag na phablet. Yes, meron mga Windows, probably some of you may mga Windows phone before, or if you haven't seen one, yes, it's being used, but it's not as popular as, of course, with Apple and Android, or we call Samsung. Let's do that. Yeah. And then it has a market share since 2017 of 33%. Before, it's, di ba, sabi in the previous slide, they said 90% mga users, so why it's only 33%? Marami na kasing version ng Windows, and marami na rin mga open source. Just the thing that I would like to share for you to remember. Now, let's go back to my question. What is the oldest window version that you have used? Etong screen na to, what version do you think is this? Um, as you think of that, no, let me tell you na from Windows 8, ito ang screen orientation niya. There's no start button, and that's why they come out with the late with ang tawag dito, a fixed update na merong start button, because there is a previous version of Windows we called Windows 7 that was released on 2009 that has a very, this is actually the screen layout ng desktop ng Windows 2007, and it's very popular. Remember, 43% to date gumagamit pa rin yan. And then, you know what? I still remember what happened before when Windows 8 was released. People were complaining kasi nawala itong start button. Nawala ito. So that's why they come up with the 8.1 to put it back. Kahit naman ako, mga galit na, hindi rin ako matutuwa no? Bakit ganun? Ha? It actually distracts you from working, from using the computer. And merong Windows 2007 din, di ba? If some of you haven't heard that before. And we call it also Windows Vista. Aside from Windows Vista, what else do you remember? Let me tell you this, no? As I've said, I've been doing this for quite some time. No, may mga tinatawag na Windows 95, Windows 3.11, and then also Windows XP. Ito ang tagal na itong ginamit, but nowadays only 5% na lang gumagamit because it's been obsolete. End of life. Guys, for 20 years. 2012 na nga, oh, usually ang software every 2 or 3 years may bagong release. Ang Linux, ang daming lumalabas niyan. So again, let me ask you this for the last time. What is the oldest version that you've used? Probably one of these. But just to let you know, merong Windows 95, merong Windows 3.11, and then Windows 3.0. Google on that and you will see what I'm talking about. Now, meron din tinatawag na Windows editions aside from window versions. No? When we say editions on Windows 10 alone, merong Windows Home, Windows 10 Pro, merong Enterprise, and merong Education. Yung Home, ito yung usually that you can found on laptops that you use for personal use, computers for personal use, even on small office. Ito, favorite to ng CompTIA, so small office and home office setup. Ito yung peer-to-peer networking or peer-to-peer communications. You don't need a server. They could still talk to each other. Sa mga larger group of Windows stations, ang kailangan dyan Windows Pro. Because Windows Pro will work with a domain environment. Yung gumagamit na ng server. Ang Windows Home kasi, it doesn't work with Windows Server. Walang domain. I mean, it will communicate, but you cannot join it in a domain. When we say domain kasi, those are advanced functions of Windows networking. And then yung enterprise level, a higher level next to Pro, higher than Pro, I mean Windows Pro, is meron tinatawag na long-term servicing channel. It's more mga license, ito yung mga tinatawag na for mga hindi madaling mag-expire na licenses sa mga small, mga medium to large companies, because licensing is really needs to be managed and controlled. This is how they control software piracy. And then meron ding mga education. So maybe the question for you, bakit marami mga version, marami mga editions? The answer to that is that yung mga functionality ng operating system, it doesn't have to be present on all computers. For example, yung functionality ng pang networking, pang pro, o kaya pang education, you don't need that on the home version. Because if you're going to put all those features on the same edition, on the same version, it will be running a lot of computer resources. It will need a powerful hardware. So if you need a powerful hardware, a stronger hardware than more than the you need for home applications, hindi ka makakakuha ng mga cheaper computer. Kaya meron computer na mas mura because it is optimum for home purposes. Meron naman more expensive because it could run Windows at this level. That is the explanation for that. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And then when it comes, all of these editions are released from 32-bit or 64-bit versions. And I've explained to you uh, the significance of having 32-bit and 64-bit compatibility, di ba? And then meron na tinatawag na Windows 10 that were built for mobile applications. I think sa phones, smartphones, or tablets. Now, let's talk about Apple Mac OS. Does any one of you have an Apple computer at home? So this window could be familiar to you. It's still an operating system. Only that the orientation, yung mga naming convention, it's not similar or exactly the same sa Windows platform or Linux. So meron diyang Finder. That meron dito file. Nandito yung pag-open ng file. Instead of sa Windows, you open Word or Excel before you create a file. A blank file. Diba? And these are the applications that be installed or created. Meron silang toolbar or sa Microsoft, ang tawag dyan is what? Taskbar. So, ang Apple OS or Mac OS, it only runs on Macintosh or Apple computers. You cannot use it on other computers like IBM or Acer or any vendors. And then yung mga versions niya, no, it's either an OS and then a number OS X, or they call it Mac OS. And then when they release updates, dot. So it's just need to be, you don't need to be a techie or to be detailed as much as Apple Mac OS is concerned. You just need to be aware. But if you have Mac OS, the better. Who knows kung anong lalabas sa question when it comes to ITF fundamentals, but basically just like this. Now, sa smartphones and tablets, sa mga iPhones, di ba, ang software that runs from this screen layout, you can tell it's an Apple iOS. Um, it runs only, of course, just like on the computer, it runs only on the same platform, on the same iPhone hardware only. And as of this release, ang version na aware ng CompTIA is version 11 and 12. But to date, no, meron ng 17, I think, above 17. I think if I remember it right, it's 17.4.3 ang iOS. So updates, of course, affects hardware functionality, compatibility. There are iOS versions that doesn't run on iPhone 4 or iPhone 5 or 7. Meron namang, lalo na yung mga iOS ngayon, excuse me, for iPhone 15 that only runs on iPhone 15 or iPhone 14 but doesn't run on iPhone X, for example. And then the same thing with applications. Meron mga apps that runs only on a particular version of iOS. Remember that meron mga compatibility issues din ng mga apps even on smartphones. Now, let's talk about Unix, Linux, and Chrome OS. Unix to start with is mostly ginagamit sa mga telecommunications. The first time I encountered this, it is more on industrial and highly commercial applications. So kaya maraming proprietary and copyrights. Sa schools, ginagamit din yan. Sa mga military, of course, Unix. And then, thanks to, who is this? You know who is the inventor of Linux? It is named after Linus or Linus Torvald. Siya ang nag-develop nito based on the foundation deriving from Unix. Ibig sabihin, the core, the kernel, almost the same. Sa ngayon, marami ng distributions and we call it distros. Linux distros from SUSE, Red Hat, Fedora, Debian, Ubuntu, and so on. Napakarami niyan guys. Meron Slackware, nagamit ko din yan. Meron din Debian. Ito, I've used this. maraming version that the orientation or the layout is almost like this. Merong mga graphical user interface na rin. Unlike in the early days of Unix and Linux, you don't see this. You had no visualization. Walang GUI interface. Everything is on a command prompt. Lalo na ang Unix. And then yung Chrome OS naman, created by Google, it only runs on Chromebook, or they call it also Chromebox hardware, computer made by Chrome, designed that only to host Chrome OS. And just to let you know again, it is from Linux. It is actually, technically speaking, a Linux distribution, but somehow it's commercialized and specifically customized, proprietary designed by Google. And it's more on ano browsing too, website browsing. Remember, di ba, Chrome, yung Google Chrome, that's what it is. Now, Android phones, another popular competing directly with Apple phones, di ba? It is also derived from Linux. These are the OS running on smartphones and even on tablets. Maraming ding mga Android phones, 'di ba? Not only the Samsung, marami. Acer phones, 'di ba? Asus, may computer din na Asus, 'di ba? And then Motorola is using a Linux-based operating system. Mga Android phones pa rin yan. As long as they are using Linux, those are Android phones. So, mga updates niyan, I mean, all operating system have major and minor updates. Maraming revision yan, but it's not as often as Windows or Android. I mean, Apple iOS. Now, going back to the Explorer, Windows, let's talk more about this Windows Explorer. This is the tool that we are all familiar and we use more often. Saan ba ginagamit ito? Ginagamit ito sa file management interface. This is when example when you browse or highlight PC, 'di ba? You can see right away yung mga common o mga shortcuts like the shortcut to documents or to downloads. And when you highlight even further, for example, in Drive C lang, it will already tell you kung ano yung space, anong file system. May BitLocker status pa rito, no? This is for protection ng hard drive, encryption. But again, an Explorer, a browser pa rin yan, but a browser of your local computer. That was originally, it was called File Explorer, and now Windows Explorer. It's still the same thing. It is also used for network purposes, like if you want to see kung sino mga computers that you are on the same network, that you can talk with, you can share files with, or the devices like network printers that you can also access or you can share, the same tool that you use, yan ang ginagamit. Windows Explorer. From here, you can do a lot, like access a media, map a network drive. Even for networking, as I've discussed earlier, there's also other shortcut like managing a computer or system properties. System properties like system settings. Oh, speaking of Windows settings, here it is. So Windows 10, here is the layout that you are all familiar with. You can launch this easily, diba? You know this when you press the Windows button or sa taskbar, you can see settings. Ito ang lalabas, Windows settings. From this window, you can do a lot from system changes, system configurations, from display, sound, or any peripheral devices. Dito ma-access yan. If you want to do by adding a user, ito, Microsoft account. Yan. This is where you create the users. If it's sometimes for gaming purposes, meron mga settings dyan. Like when you are streaming, you are gaming mode, time zone dito naman, and then personalization. You want to customize your desktop background, how you lock the screen, or you want to change the color settings. Ang tinatawag natin yan, themes, window themes. This is where you change it to personalization, and even on security. Windows settings is another word or another term where you have this we are also all familiar with is the control panel. So control panel, just like Windows settings, this is all where you do your configuration like sa system and security that you do the changes on Windows settings. It's also the same thing. Kung ano yung changes na ginagawa mo sa Windows settings, it's the same change that you can do here. Whether it's a network, aside from system and security, or sa time zone, nandun din yan. Or when you are managing a program to install or remove, it's the same thing that you can do on Windows settings. It's like um, if you're not ready if you're not yet ready to use Windows settings, or if you're not familiar with it and you are more used to control panel, there you go. Pwede mong gawin dito yon. So only that instead of icons or shortcuts, it is by category and by list when you view it. Like for example, when you click on ease of access, it looks like this. This is what you can do when it comes to ease of access options, like magnifier, change the screen size, when you are meron narrator na kailangan. These are very useful to other people na who are also using computers. Lalo na dito sa US especially, there are elders that I've met, they use their computers to process their payment. They can do it online. Hindi na kailangan mag-travel, mag-commute pa. So this ease of access that you can do on control panel, it's the same thing that you can do on Windows settings. Now, we also have these advanced management utilities, like for example, Task Manager. When you sign in, you customize the desktop. If you want to do the event viewer, these are for advanced management. This is used usually by the IT people or tech support people. Dito kasi naka-record yung activities ng computer mo, from system to application to user and everything. So a device driver, all you have to do is the shortcut to open it is from the power menu, or you press the button start X. You right click on the start button. This is how you're gonna launch it. Ito nga, may mga console like the PowerShell. These are when you know for advanced usage, for advanced use sa mga advanced users, I mean. Ayan ang mga PowerShell na ginagamit. Yung mga tinatawag din na admin. When you're doing some, scripting, programming, that's where you do it. Now, let's talk about web browser. Web browser, maraming klase din yan di ba? From Windows Edge or Internet Explorer. Ito, end of life na to, just to let you know. And then, meron din browser na from Firefox, made by Mozilla, or Chrome, again, made by Google, and from Apple is the Safari. Lahat yan, internet browser kung sa ating language. And this is what you use to go to the internet. This is what you go to visit a website, to know the information of a company or through access to a social media. Web browser pa rin yan in general. So you might ask, what's the difference between the two? There's a lot. They are written differently. They have different codes. But meron din tinatawag na compatibility. Meron mga website that can be accessed only by Internet Explorer or Edge or by Chrome. And mostly, lalo na mga public website, can be used by any browser. But you will encounter sometimes na, lalo na yung mga government websites o kaya mga not ang mga privately owned, may mga ano yan, may mga website that only functions a particular browser. So usually, in general, all browsers merong address bar and you tab to go to another website while keeping the existing one. So in a website, di ba, meron dyan yung what you call the URL. Nandyan yung web address. This tells you kung saan located, so anong page that you can go. There's the, we call it URL. Sa madalit salita, commonly known as web address. This is where you access the websites, browse and explore or navigate to the web pages. And then meron din tinatawag na site navigation where you can do with a browser. And then the hyperlinks, for example, dito hyperlink, you can map it dito. This actually, when you right click, you can copy the link and you can do other things. I haven't used add to reading list, or maybe you save the link. That's why you do it. Instead of typing the website locations, you just save it. Save it as a target or add to your reading list. That's what you do. Those are the things what you can do on a browser. Di ba meron din mga browser controls that some of you already aware. Actually, mga generation nyo and younger are even more, I would say, proficient to use this. Yeah. Using browser controls, meron mga back, and then forward, and then we have also the stop controls. Yeah, back, forward, and the stop. Where's the X? Usually merong stop dyan, and then the refresh one. That's the thing. And then the address bar. Yan ang mga ginagamit nyo. And then setting up as a home page. So sa settings, lahat ng browser guys, merong settings that you can modify, you can adjust from theme or like example, a home page. Or you can have your favorites bar that you know now when you save a website, a link, it saves to your you can make it as your favorite because you don't have to type in, you don't have to remember anong website ba yon, you don't have to search for it, nakasave na kung saan ka pupunta. Yeah, those are the things that you can do in a browser that some of you already know. All you have to do is to be aware and to practice the right thing in using these controls. Now, in this unit, it is recommended to be one of your lab is to browse a website. Browse a website, make it more proficient. Use all of those browsers that we discussed from Edge to down to Chrome to Google. Gamitin nyo lahat yun and you can see the difference. You can see that there are websites that you can use any browser. What I do, guys, sa akin is I use different websites for my personal. I use different website for my exploration or for my online training. I use a different website for my work. A browser, I mean. I use different browsers. Although, in this lab activity, that it is also recommended for you to explore other OS like Apple, just to be aware. But now you know that there's more than a Windows operating system that you can see. So in this unit, we cover how to distinguish between different types of operating systems designed for different computers, like the workstations, servers, mobiles, and even virtualization. We cover that. We identify the commonly used operating system either as a commercial ones or the open source. And you can tell, di ba, that Windows, Mac, those are the things either as commercial or open source operating system. And lastly, we also covered the browser navigation, how to use a browser, what are the different types of browsers that you can explore and that you can use for different purpose or the same application. I hope this has been informative to you. See you on the next unit. Thank you.